Hey, howdy. I'm Darlene Marshall, host of the Better Than Fine podcast. And this week on the show, I have someone who I think is a true thought leader in the movement space. And I think of as a thought leader as somebody who is being innovative, who's pushing the boundaries of what we think of as happening in the space. And that is Katy Bowman, the founder of Nutritious Movement. She is a biomechanist. She is an experienced practitioner who's written over 10 books and really, I think, is revolutionizing how we think about movement and exercise. She got a new book out and she's here to talk all about it. So I'm really excited to finally get to meet her. Comment, share, subscribe. You know what to do. I can't wait to share it with you. So let's get to it. Well, hello there, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, wellness coach, and well-being educator, Darlene Marshall, and I think we all have had times in our lives where we just don't feel motivated to exercise. And when I look back over my own life, back in my 20s, I was just after being diagnosed with EDS, I didn't really want to move because my body just kind of hurt. And when I think about my 30s, the periods of time I didn't really want to move and I wasn't really motivated had a lot to do with burnout and just wanting to fall into the couch and play games and eat. And now that I'm in my 40s and I think about the last few years, honestly, it's just when I've been feeling pretty bored and uninspired after a decade of doing kind of the same things and needing to find new ways to get myself into it. And when I think about the old way of fitness and thinking about motivating ourselves to movement, the word that comes up in my mind is discipline in those harsh soft quotes, and the lack of discipline that we would get the kind of shame pile up that if you didn't do it, you really shoulda. And honestly, that kind of discipline mentality, I think, is a great virtue signal. That the people who are really consistent, they get to feel righteous that they did the thing. And then the rest of us should feel guilty that we didn't do the thing. Except if you listen to the show, you know that doesn't really work. That's not really going to give us lasting motivation. It's not a problem-solving approach when we think about getting ourselves to move our bodies. And if that worked, if the virtue signaling, obligation, discipline, pile-on actually worked, people would move, right? Think about the amount of morality and shame that the fitness industry just has thrown around over the last few decades, and it hasn't changed a whole lot. So we probably need a new approach. And that's one of the 8 million reasons why I find today's guest's work so refreshing. Katy Bowman is a biomechanist who is out there on a mission to change the way that people relate to movement. She's the founder of Nutritious Movement, which I think is one of the most delicious names of a brand out there. I've always really loved it when I stumbled on it many moons ago. Best-selling author, speaker, leader in the movement. Love that phrasing too. And she's one of those people that the first time I found her work, I just thought, this person gets it. And I love it. And I'm so excited to have her on the show. Katy Bowman, welcome to Better Than Fine.
Wow, that was a nice introduction. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I have to confess, I think maybe you've picked up on this already. I have a big professional crush on you and your work. I first encountered your work when you collaborated with another fangirl crush of mine, which is Kelly McGonigal for the New York Times for the Joy Workout. So yeah, we'll just kick this off by gushing that she's super cool and you're super cool. And I'm really excited for our listeners. So you got a new book. I Know How to Exercise. Or no, I Know I Should Exercise. It helps if you get the title right. Let's praise the guest and get the title right. I Know I Should Exercise, but 44 Reasons We Don't Move and How to Get Over Them. With a quote from Kelly McGonigal on the cover, where she says that it is the most insightful guide to getting moving I've ever read. What a compliment. Tell us about what inspired you to tell us all how to get over ourselves and get to the movement?
Well, my goodness, I've been teaching movement, precision movement, how to deal with, you mentioned EDS, how to deal with things that arise in our lives that maybe complicate general fitness information, which is quite a few people. There might be more people dealing with special circumstances than not at this point, and so I'm a biomechanist, which is just a type of science that looks at the way the lever systems and forces in the body affect and are affected by the biology. And what I found was many people wanted to feel better in their bodies. They wanted to be able to take the information given to them, whether it was by me or physical therapist or their doctor or their friends or their coach or their trainer, whoever it was. But there was some set of barriers. And, you mentioned this idea of shame and guilt, people going, I'm just not moral. I'm not following it because I'm not moral. And I also think that there's sort of this idea that you're not following it because you don't understand. So then it's also this intelligence. You're not grasping why you really need to do this. So then people start to feel like, am I lazy? Do I not understand? And I had this psychologist. This book, I Know I Should Exercise, but is co-written by me and a clinical psychologist, Dr. Diana Hill. And she actually came to me to a workshop that I was doing. And she says, really, a lot of the ways that you talk about movement follow this type of approach to psychology, acceptance, commitment, therapy, and psychology. And she was illuminating the psychological aspects of what I like to do by breaking it down into smaller bits. All the different approaches to making, let's just say, exercise and movement more palatable, more doable for people as far as their mental muscle goes. But the book came about because as we started to work together on smaller projects, I thought, there's a lot of people who won't get to go to a psychologist. There are sports psychologists for usually competitive or higher level athletes. There's no fitness psychology. We don't have, I had to take plenty of sports psychology when I was studying kinesiology, but it was really to get through, your racing hurdles. Why were you sabotaging yourself for this big performance thing? And I'm like, well, the tool is really the same when you're grappling with right now. The big race is, can I fit in 30 minutes around having to pick up my kids over here and get this work project done? The tools were the same, but you don't hear the language around people just dealing with day-to-day use of their body. So I thought it'd be really great to write this book. And instead of being this long book that you had to, just read to understand psychological tools, it would be just the excuses and how you and I, Diana and I, would help someone coming into our offices saying, here's my problem. I just got this lupus diagnosis, for example, and I am dealing with chronic fatigue. And I know that exercise makes me feel better, but I'm not quite sure how to navigate the fact that if I go too hard, it's going to send me in a flare. So what do I do? Or if it's a person who said, I used to be so fit as a college athlete, and now at 50, I feel defeated. Like in all these different things that are coming up. And so we actually wrote this book of just, you open it to the excuse. You read the excuse, and then we talk to you just like we would talk to you if you were in our office.
Yeah, I'm stuck almost on the phrase fitness psychology because I feel so seen because coming out of the positive psychology space. So I have a master's in applied positive psychology from UPenn and then 14 years as a personal trainer and a wellness coach. And really that's what Better Than Fine is about. Is exactly what you just described. Yeah. So my immediate selfish thing is like, okay, so you and me and Diana are going to found a whole field of fitness psychology. And
that's right. It has been found.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Can we be in a club together? And for anyone listening that wants to be in our club, let's go. Because I think you really are onto something in a sweet spot here. In the broad swath of your work, but in this book specifically, it really spoke to me about the way we talk about movement as an industry and also collectively,
Mhm.
because I immediately picked up from the first pages, we share a mutual annoyance with the prescriptive phrase of just like move more
Mhm.
and why it is such terrible advice. And I think you alluded to it a moment ago, but it's okay if people don't feel they have the understanding. Oh, am I just dumb that I don't get this? They don't know how to weave it into their lives. And so I think it can be really disempowering. But I'm really curious your thoughts to add to that about like, why is it such bad advice? And how do we, as practitioners, as people, feel empowered to break it down? I describe it as a language, right? Movement
Mhm.
language and change language. You need all these little component parts. You need to learn the vocabulary and how to conjugate the verbs and then kind of build things into sentences, expecting everyone to come in and speak in paragraphs. Yeah, that I wish there was a clear question in there, but I just got really excited. So
Well, I heard some clear questions. So one of the clear questions is, why is move more maybe not as helpful as we think it is? So I always
Mm,
like to acknowledge that, just move something, just move anything. So we are in a movement drought, really, in
mm,
our society, and as our society ideals or culture sort of expands, we're seeing this sort of decline of movement globally. So it's not even really isolated to our culture anymore. It's starting, and it's spreading for technological reasons, for many reasons. But when you are in a drought, it's just sort of like if you were starving for food, it was like just eat anything, and so that makes sense on that level. Just start moving. You can't get it wrong. Um, However, if you went to a nutritionist, and so I talk about movement and nutrition. You talk about movement like a language. I talk about it using the nutritional framework as a as an analogy, but also I kind of mean it literally in some cases. Um, if you went to a dietary nutritionist and said, "I'm not eating well," and I'm not really sure where to start, but I've pinpointed this idea that I think it has to do with what I'm eating, the way I'm fueling my body. And they said, just eat well. It's almost too general to uptake at that point.
and a little insulting.
Well, it's just, yeah, because it almost seems like, come on, just
Yeah,
you could
don't you
just do
know? Just
this.
eat well.
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah. And so movement, I try to come up with these tenets of movement in this book to help someone organize these decisions. So like if you're choosing between not moving and moving whatever
Move.
it is usually going to be better for you. But there's a lot of people who are like, I would choose movement, but every time I do, I hurt myself.
Yeah,
Or I would
that was
choose
me.
movement and this other thing happens. So because I'm coming at the way we use our bodies, I would say more clinically, more about mechanically, the physical outcomes that happen when you exercise. And that really general advice, sometimes, maybe more often than not, can lead people to hitting a wall sooner than later. And so we wanted to start breaking it down. I mean, there's a little bit of movement as nutrition in here, this idea that a lot of different things count as movement here. And you are talking about the reasons people might not want to take it up. They're confused by it. They're not sure what to do. Also, they might not like what's on the exercise menu because their perception of what counts as exercise, I think because of the messaging of people in the exercise field, including myself, have to really be careful to make sure that we don't limit the modes and the tools we use in exercise training and research to the way people actually uptake movement in their general lives. So I'll just leave that answer there. But I think that yes, it's tricky. Just move is tricky, maybe not helpful advice, not like we thought it was.
Yeah. Yeah, and even, one of the things I think there's a there when you're talking about the ways in which, especially I think content creators will talk
Mhm.
about what counts.
Right.
Um I think the latest debate I'm seeing kind of popularized in social media has been whether or not walking counts. And I appreciated the number of times you talked about walking in the book because, I think about my mom's had 2 knees and a hip replaced. Walking definitely counts. And when we demonize home modalities and tell people, well, this isn't enough or this isn't good enough, all you're doing is shutting them down. It's like, I don't know if you've seen any of the studies about organic food and the ways in which if you push organic only food enough in areas where it's too expensive or not available, people just eat less vegetables because, if they're damned if they don't, so they just don't.
Yeah.
And I think these well-intentioned, or maybe not even well-intentioned, maybe it's just about making arguments that people will have go viral, arguments then disempower people further. And, shame, blame, guilt, 3 horsemen of the motivation apocalypse. And we're talking about like longevity. So I think there is a there. And I really appreciate in the book how equanimity, I don't know what that word is, but like how open you are about just the things that will feel good, the things that are feeling interesting. Walking definitely counts, just the idea being to bring down barriers instead of trying to do everything perfectly.
Well, perfect is the first barrier we want to break through. I mean, we bring up this idea of movement rules. We have a lot of rules around movement that we come to the practice of exercise with, and they don't even necessarily come from what we see on social media only. They came before, like based on your PE experiences or articles you've read. And certainly now we are adding way more exercise rules, meaning, like what counts, like that's a big rule. And when you perceive that exercise is only valuable to you if it's for a certain duration, if it's a particular set of modes, if there's a particular intensity that counts, and I think that's the argument that maybe people are saying, yeah, or the outcome that counts, then what happens is we are eliminating massive categories of movement and also periods of our day where movement could otherwise fit in. I mean, and that's really the issue, because when we're talking about why, if we go back to the just move, volume is really important when it comes to movement. Getting enough movement calories, let's say, to get ourselves where we're not starving. So if someone was starving, you would say, let's get you not starving. So let's work on volume. But when people hear volume and exercise, like there's no way I can add 2 more workouts to my day. And like, I'm not talking about workouts. I'm talking about activities of daily living, of reducing some of the sedentary time, of reducing some of the over outsourced or mechanized movements and just bringing them back in, yes, to quite simply break up the shape of your body more often throughout the day. So we could flip it and say, the problem isn't so much that you're not getting enough exercise. Let's change it and say the problem is if you put a star at every one of your major joints, you make a constellation, you make a shape with your body. Your constellation is almost the same constellation all day long. That's an issue for many different tissues of the body, not just the heart and lungs, not just the joints where the stars are, not just the muscles. All of the tissue really needs you to be cycling through a variety of constellations throughout the day. And sometimes cycling through them faster ends up moving other ranges of motion like your heart and your lungs. But ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, is break up these long periods of time of this fixed positioning, because that your body does not thrive in that situation. Just like a garden doesn't thrive without water and weeding and other nutrients. Like, we have to be changing this up. So a lot of things count when we look at the reason for movement as being beyond maybe really specific performance outcomes.
I love the imagery of the constellation, and yeah, the idea that a lot of things count if the goal is change the constellation instead of do this prescribed thing for 60 minutes. Another big topic in the book that you bring up is core values. On the show, we'll say the things that matter most, and that our wellness, our well-being efforts, our striving, our thriving is in service of what matters most, no matter what that is to you. Can you talk a bit about how you think of someone who doesn't like movement, doesn't want to like it, knows they need it, like buys into the arguments we're making, but struggles to get over that hump? How do you see that person leveraging core values? Because I certainly encounter people who are like, yeah, but how is exercise going to make me better at, I don't know, being a mom to, overburdened with, I'm working and I don't have any time.
Oh my gosh, that's the easiest one for at least me to answer because I can actually show up as a much calmer, more present, more patient parent and employee if I've taken care of some of my own physical needs a bit better. So human bodies need movement. I mean, just like human bodies need food. Us not liking it is much more in our head than in actual cells of our tissues. Like our bodies really thrive when they're being fed and water. Now, that being said, I know that my body feels better when I've been fed nutritiously as far as food goes, but there are certain foods that I don't like. That's fine. The buffet is pretty big when it comes to swapping out foods that I do like. Or maybe I have one child that hates to eat in the morning, and my husband too hates to eat in the morning, where I and my other child really need to eat in the morning. So this idea that movement has to be a certain thing, it has to happen in a certain shape, and it has to be certain foods would be like trying to get everyone to eat nutritiously by saying, no, you can't really snack or graze in a certain way. You can't eat smaller meals. You have to eat 3 big meals. You know what I mean? Like we're really trying to tell people exactly how they need to take it down for it to count or for it to be effective. But I mean, if you look at cultures all over the globe, there's a lot of different ways people have nourished themselves well through food historically. And we are living in a particular movement culture that's trying to say that fitness exercise is the only way to uptake movement. I mean, if we talked about nutrition and food and went to Italy, they would laugh because they don't really have a nutrition-centric filter like we would do maybe in North America around food. They eat nutritiously, arguably much more nutritiously than North Americans do. But at the core of their nutritional profile is connection to family, traditions, culture, enjoyment, slowing down. And I think that there's a lot of, for the person who says, I hate movement, it's like, I'm going to say that maybe you haven't found the movement diet that works for you yet. Right now, you're seeing it as a chore. You're seeing like, eat these Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts are the only, and I love Brussels sprouts. This is not a great analogy for me, but let's say that you pick the thing that you hate the most, and it's the person telling you that is the food that is essential. And so psychological flexibility, which is the approach to psychology that's in this book, is let's break down that's a movement rule tool, like what is this person who's like, how is movement going to help me? I would go back with, what do you think counts as movement here? Because maybe picking your kids up after school, and instead of parking at the, driving and sitting in line at the long pickup line, and then being in your car for 27 minutes while you wait for your kids to come out, and it's this slow thing and everyone's melting down in the car, that you walk a quarter of a mile in, clear your head, pick them up, and you walk back out with them. And now, bring a little snack in a bag, and now you're just all moving together. No one's sitting in the car. Everyone's decompressing from the stress load that they just experienced. And this is now a beautiful family time. This is outside time for that. That's movement. That counts.
Yeah, I think part of obviously the narrative of what we're talking about is changing up what counts. But even in the examples you gave about nutrition, our industry very often is saying we've got, creators, coaches, trainers, whatever out there saying, oh no, here's the right way to eat. Here's the right way to move. And ignoring the millennia of examples that we could cite where there are other ways that humans have thrived outside of those models. And I loved everything you had to say about psychological flexibility in the book, because it's the jam, right? It's how we break out of these paradigms that are so clearly not working for I think a majority of people. Even the people who are able to origami their lifestyle to conform, how many of them are struggling with orthorexia or overuse injuries or their own psychological relationship to exercise? And I'm sure you've encountered this. I've encountered this. Plenty of people who in the later decades of their career look back and go, oh, why did I do X, Y, and Z? And really kind of burn out as fitness professionals because of their attempt to conform to these ideals that don't even work for us, nonetheless for our clients. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I'm singing. You're singing my song, Katy.
Yeah.
I love it.
I want to give a shout out to all those trainers and coaches though, because, I come from a very traditional perspective on movement. I studied kinesiology at university, through graduate school as well. And so I think what's happened is, like, we know certain things about movement. We know movement needs to be distributed well throughout your body, right? You can't just exercise one particular area. We know that exercise is really best distributed throughout your day. So it's not just hyper-focused or concentrated into one particular area. So this is why I leaned more heavily into the nutritional framework, because we have a movement diet. So instead of thinking about helping people with a particular workout, which I think trainers need to do, people need assistance with workouts, but it's when you are a movement professional, recognizing that there is a movement diet that people have throughout a lifetime, to recognize the effects of, if you only consumed, so I've written a lot of books on movement, but I'm going to reference Move Your DNA right now, and the My Perfect Movement Plan, which is like the part 2 where you're filling that in. From Move Your DNA, I talked about the idea of a nutrient, like, again, most healthy food, Brussels sprout, kale, whatever. This is a very nourishing, nutritious food, but you cannot subsist on the most nutritious food alone. Yeah. And when you approach modes of exercise in that same way, when someone has a single way of moving, that's their exercise, and they consume it in exclusivity. They consume it in absence of any other movements, which a lot of people do. They sit for the bulk of the day. They've got that chair constellation, driving to and from work, while at work, and their leisure time afterwards. And they hit that dose of movement. They're like, I'm a regular exerciser. I'm getting 60, 75 minutes a day to check that, cardiovascular box or muscle building box, whatever it is. The reason we see, once people get to like 40s and their 50s, start to break down, even though they've done it right, those same air quotes that you put on earlier on another term, is to recognize that cannot carry a person through a life. And so when you recognize that we need to all the joints need their movements, there's a way though of helping someone say, like, what do your activities of daily living move? And what do your activities of daily living currently not move? Which parts of your body, which areas of your body, which way? Does anything in your daily life challenge your balance, challenge agility, challenge power, challenge strength, challenge endurance? Does it move your hips through their full range of motion? What about your shoulders? And when you actually show someone the framework of, say, here's what I actually want you to do. I want you to move all of these parts in all these different ways, but the smorgasbord of activities that you can pick from to get this movement go all the way from these very, I would say, prescribed or well-dosed programs, workouts, to also the shape of your body when you watch Netflix in the night? What if we could add some hip mobility exercise to your downtime over here? What if when you're in the grocery store, tired parents who are just already feeling tired and now feeling bad that I have to choose between making this meal for my family or going to exercise for myself and giving them, fast food, and I've chosen to go in the grocery store. It's like, great, pick up the hand cart. Pick up 2. Challenge your kids to make them as heavy as possible while you carry them through. And guess what? That's a strength training move right there. So it's just breaking open the movement rules to say, we're training for life, my friends. And we're not training for life only in the gym. We can use life as a way of training for life, as well as for improving what's happening during gym time. So I just want to add that I think that we haven't thought it all the way through is all. Like we all have, it's like paved with good intentions here. I don't think that, I don't think anyone is trying to be a jerk. Although maybe if you're just making a contrarian video for likes, you might be being a jerk.
Yeah. I think there are some people out there who are trying to be jerks.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think most of the people who are out there, like getting a certification, they're an ethical practitioner. They are well-intentioned.
Absolutely.
I came from a major recognizable corporate brand. I spent 8 years in club. I was management. Like I've walked that path too and been like, ooh, yeah, we're missing some stuff. But I also hope that every one of my clients that's listening, who I tell foam roll while you're watching television, hears you and gets the foam roller while they're listening to the show. In the book, you talk about the relationship between grief and movement. And Joy was my soft sell to talk about grief and movement. And as somebody who has had a big year of loss myself and used training for my first marathon as a way to move my way through a lot of loss. When I got to that, I'm starting to tear up. When I got to the chapter where you talk about your dad and you talk about grief and movement, I had to park myself for a little bit. And I wanted to just invite you to talk a bit about why movement can be such a powerful tool for processing loss and grief and sadness, because I think so often right now when people are feeling the heaviness of whether it's the world or their personal lives, the message is like bed rot, which I don't think
or doom scroll
or doom scroll. Yep. Bed rot and doom scroll. And I think there is another way that you illuminate, and I'd love to share that with our listeners.
Yeah. So this is a really important topic to me, actually. I'll talk here in a second about this general idea of moving our bodies in general to, let's just say, metabolize the effects on our psyche that grief has. But I right after my father had died, it's been 4 or 5 years now, I did a podcast on my own show about really the loss of movement we have, specifically around grieving when people die, which is different than just the grief of, transitioning in life and other types of losses where, animals, of which we are one, really use movement, shaking their body out, as a way of the final step of, I would say, any sort of major stress to their nervous system. So like after you've, if there's been a battle, and I have kind of a farm situation going on, and you see animals lose their loved ones quite often for whatever reasons. And they have almost a dance. Yeah. Like shaking it out. And a lot of times just wandering or walking around like seemingly lost, but I'm like, oh, well, they are moving. And then I talk about just even the process of tending bodies that have passed. So much in this culture has been outsourced. Our grieving is very silent. We hold a lot of, it's not to say that it's not reverent, but being biological beings, when there's a cascade of, when you think of like, I think of the hormones that are dumped when you get into like a fight or flight situation. and now how that is happening all of the time, but there's no fight or flight. There's no movement. You're primed for sort of big movements, but none of the movements actually happen. We tend to, like you said, take to the bed, or feel like we need to be really still. And so in the book, I was talking about general movement. My father was a tremendous walker, very irritated at the idea that walking doesn't count, because that was a big part of his daily, he'd walk the loop of all the exercises and do his pull-ups, from the 70s, all those little exercise stations.
Yeah.
And so I would walk in memoriam. You know what I mean? Like that, I could honor him. And, when you have a death, you're sort of like, and it depends on the trauma, the suddenness of it. I think a lot of these things can create a sort of shock, but to remind yourself that you are still here, you still have a body, and your relationship is changing with them. A lot of grief is happening in the brain. You have this relationship, and a lot of it is in your own mind, like it's just the memories. And then you have to, I don't know, make some adjustments where the person, their value in your life doesn't really go away, but their presence does, and it requires a shift. And I always think of movement as such a good backbone for any time you need to do anything neurologically. It's nice to, it doesn't have to be like hard workouts, although for some people it might include a hard workout. And I mentioned a couple of organizations here where I live in Washington State is something called Wild Grief. And for children who've lost, siblings or parents or other close relationships, instead of them going to, I would say, a traditional, or only going to a traditional therapeutic situation where, you're sitting and talking about your feelings, because grief has this element of physical, writhing, wanting to break, like wanting to move your body sometimes and wail, beat the ground, like that, those come natural to people, but we really suppress it for the talking it through, letting yourself get some of these physical releases. With Wild Grief, they take children and their families, teens and young ones, out for day hikes, or sometimes with the older teens, like backpacking trips, and have them use their bodies in ways like, you are here. Look, the river's still flowing. The clouds are still going. Life is going on. And you're also talking about your losses with other people who've experienced the losses, but while everyone's really dynamic, and that's just, it's been shown to have such a positive effect. And so, you can, if you've got a more traditional sedentary loss group that you're going to, you could suggest, like, can we do a walk? Can we do some walking sessions? Or does anyone, we have other groups here too that are just general, people who are grieving, maybe they've had cancer and they have to grieve the loss of what they expected it to be. The idea of going out and doing gentle movements. Again, I'm not talking about signing up for a marathon, although it sounds like you did that. And that was also helpful. I'm just saying there's a whole spectrum of what counts as movement to process grief. Don't have to feel pigeonholed here.
Yeah. No, I'm not advocating for anyone else to do it the way I'm doing it. Like having Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and pushing a rider in the Marine Corps marathon. It's not for the faint of heart, or something that I think anyone should just casually do. But as you're talking, one of the things that occurred to me was the ways in which, from I think a pretty young age, we are taught that even if you're anxious, even if you're nervous, right, sit there, right? You're in school, you got a presentation, you're like, starting to feel that fight or flight kick in. And we're taught so early to suppress that. And as I said, I've had quite a bit of loss this year. And I think about, being in the receiving line and being in the services, and you're standing there, you're sitting there, you're suppressing those impulses. And one of the charities I work with is the Travis Manion Foundation, and they take, similar to what you're describing, children who've lost a parent in active duty on outdoor excursions for exactly the kind of wilderness processing experience that you're describing. And they do it with partners as well. But more and more these kind of rewilding experiences where people are having opportunities to not only connect with movement, but also nature, and remind ourselves that we are linked and that there are these processes in our nervous system that if we'll just allow them to do the do,
Mm-hmm.
carry us through. And I think I've theoretically had that in my mind, but this year has really brought it into practice. And then to see it in the book, was like, oh yeah, I'm not the only one that knows this. Humans have known this as long as there have been humans.
That's right.
Uh,
Having big dance party, it's not a party, but like, again, they're dynamic grieving.
Rituals.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
they're
I lost
rituals.
my father and my best friend 6 weeks apart in the same
Oh,
year. And for my best friend, we actually had a dance flash mob at her service. So it wasn't even, the pristine wilderness. It was nothing more than celebrating her physically, because we knew that she would have loved this. And so it just to feel like, you might have an instinct to move and to feel okay, thinking outside of the box, moving outside of the box a little bit, explore that doesn't all have to look exactly the same.
yeah. And to let it lead you. I've
Mm-hmm.
got one more question, if you'll indulge me. I think we got the time for this. Is I have found with my clients, especially those that really struggle with movement motivation and many of the things you talk about in the book, that identity can play a big role in
Mm-hmm.
movement and exercise, and the feeling that like, oh, this isn't for me for whatever reason. Um, what do you say to those people who believe that all the stuff we're talking about, like that their identity is at odds with movement, with exercise, with this kind of change?
Well, I can speak from personal experience. I have written quite extensively in some books that I I don't really see myself as a mover. I do now. I'm, almost 50 now, but I was not an athletic kid. I was a bookworm. I was very studious, kind of nerdy person. I discovered movement later on, and I've made the tagline for my business like movement is for every body. It's for every body. This is just about, it's like saying that I don't really see myself as someone who needs to eat. Like that, like we all need food. These are just biological imperatives. And I do think my early identity as not really seeing myself, I'm always the clumsiest person there. Even now, I am, I would say, quite athletic. I am a very capable mover. I am far over on the spectrum of movement, but I don't identify really that way. I really see myself as like the clumsiest person, like the things I put myself into, I'm like, I am the worst. I went to a ballet class once when I was in my 20s, and I'm like, it is like an ox and everyone else here are like jackrabbits or something.
Yeah, one of the jokes in our family is my cousin and I are ballerinos
Yeah,
instead of
exactly.
ballerinas.
And I think it's just you haven't found the right venue. So I'm hearing Diana, my co-author, in my mind. I think half of it is you haven't found the right types of movement and the right situations of movement for you where you flourish. The other half is your mind has a lot of judgments about yourself that need to be dealt with. So I think it's both of those things. And I think that finding spaces where you feel more successful, you see more people who, if it's something about like, I don't have these characteristics, therefore I can't do that. And then you see some people with those characteristics doing it. Like I just got back from a dynamic aging retreat, and there was people there who like, you can't do that when, I'm 65, I can't do this. And then I had some of my co-teachers who are 75, do these particular things. So these are unhelpful thoughts. We have a lot of we didn't talk about a lot of the psychological tools here. recognizing your unhelpful thoughts in these matters. So it's not so much identity. I have that identity. I'm not really an exerciser like everyone else is an exerciser. Even though it persists now, even when I'm on a rowing team, a competitive rowing team, I'm still like, I still don't see myself in this way. But I realize that it's a part of my brain that likes to tell me things about myself. And I've learned how to not listen to that voice for many other areas of my life. And I learned how to not listen to it for this part of my life as well. So I think that's the, what do you tell that person is, let's find you a situation where you can start proving yourself wrong. And also let's look at some of these unhelpful thoughts and acknowledge that they come in. Thank you for telling me that I don't belong in this ballet class. And also I'm here. So obviously I do belong, and okay, I'm the worst one here, but guess what? I still got a good workout in. And then also, and I had fun, or actually I didn't have fun, and I didn't go back, and I found rowing, which suits me that much better. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay it's okay. Another thing in the book is you got to strengthen your so what muscle. So what? It wasn't the right thing for you, you know? And once you're armed with these tools, then you start to see like, everyone is here. They all have this fake spotlight that they've put on themselves, but everyone's got their own spotlight on. No one's thinking about what you're doing. You fit, you have a body. Movement is for you. Movement is for every body. The end.
And I so I want to share this appreciation with you that I think when people who are positioned as experts in the fitness and wellness space own up that we also struggle with these things is when people feel more and more empowered. So thank you for sharing that. I certainly have my own version of that. 14 years in fitness, and I still have that moment of like, but I'm not really like a personal trainer.
Yeah.
Like, cause I like you function very different in the space.
Mm-hmm.
I approach my clients very differently. I approach my own fitness differently because I have EDS. Like, I think owning that opens the aperture of what we think it's about. And that means that it is for everybody when we make it for everybody. So thank you for that. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing it. And where could our listeners find more of you other than your book that I'm going to hold up one more time?
Thank you.
I know I should exercise, but Diana Hill and Katy Bowman.
Yeah, Nutritious Movement, everything. Social media, website is a good place to find me. If you like the sound of my voice droning on, the Move Your DNA podcast is really good. And then I have a Substack, Movement Colored Glasses, for people who really want to dive into seeing all the ways movement shows up into the world, not only through the lens of exercise.
I didn't know about your Substack.
It's brand new.
One more subscriber.
Thank you.
Exciting.
There you go. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing. I really, really appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, it was a pleasure talking with you.
Absolutely an honor to have you on the show. And of course, dear listener, we would love to hear your feedback on this and every episode of Better Than Fine. So you can email me. It is info@darlene.coach. Or you can find me on Instagram. It's darlene.coach. My website is, wait for it, darlene.coach. And of course, I'm there on LinkedIn. If you're a fan of the show, I hope you've already subscribed and left us a 5-star review. But if you haven't, go ahead and do those things now. Of course, sharing is caring. And if you share about the show, feel free to tag me. Thank you so much. Take good care of yourselves and be well.